Bear Brothers, the Vireon Saga. Part 10. Widening Gap, Faith and Sedition. In the year 989 M41, 90 years after the Space Wolf arrival on Vireo, a Viper-class scout sloop approached the Emerald Planet. An hour later, an Arvus lighter transport shuttle set down at Jegan Station. Timing could not have been better. Orc pilots had begun nightly bombing raids in their fighter bombers, and one of the Gargants was near completion. As the shuttle drew near, the citizens cheered, and even the Space Wolves were deeply relieved. That is, until the icons of the ecclesiarchy were discernible. The unmistakable stylized eye of the Inquisition was displayed all over the ostentatious craft. Most of the gathered crowd did not know what those symbols meant, and the Space Wolves held their peace. The stakes were too high. They would have to welcome the new arrivals as long-lost kin. When the shuttle's rear ramp came down, an Inquisitor and his retinue appeared out of the cargo bay's dim interior. 4 warrior bodyguards, veterans pulled from the ranks of the Imperial Guard, preceded the Inquisitor down the ramp and took positions at its base. 2 cherubim familiars bobbed about the Inquisitor's head as he sternly strode down to the landing pad. Several acolytes and servitors followed, and then a collection of psychers appeared, a mystic and 2 untouchables, as well as a sanctionite. The Wolf Lord had encountered these types before. A worse assemblage could not have been imagined by the Space Wolf. Why had the Inquisition come here, and why bring so many loathsome psychers in such a small party? Another shuttle appeared, and a delegation of scholars, laborers, and technicians disembarked, followed by more guardsmen. There were no dignitaries. This was clearly an exploratory expedition, and they had not expected to find living humans waiting for them. The Space Marines greeted the Inquisitor and his staff as warmly as they could manage, and even prepared a welcome feast. The grim-faced man was not discourteous, but, as is common among Inquisitors, divulged little and questioned much. The visitors were provided accommodations in the bunkers, where the Orc bombing could not trouble them. As soon as the Wolf Lord could assemble his inner circle, they quietly weighed the implications of this visit. They may abhor the ecclesiarchy and its lapdogs, but they needed them. The people of Vireo needed them. There would likely not be another chance for deliverance, but they had to be careful. The High Lords of Terror could not be permitted to discover the viability of the indigenous Vireons as Space Wolf recruits before the Great Wolf and the rest of the Legion. By this time, the Marines had begun to appreciate that Vireo itself had unusual and extraordinary qualities. They knew there was something special about this world, and they had claimed it in the name of their Primarch. If this expedition was truly exploratory, it could only be a prelude to recolonization. They could not allow control of the planet to slip out of Space Wolf hands. When all the facts were considered, a probable truth began to take shape. The Imperium had first come to Vireo with some surreptitious agenda. That much was known. For some reason, the initial endeavor was abandoned or put on hold, but now it appeared that plans had resumed. They were doubtlessly aware of the Orc invasion a century ago and had deliberately chosen not to intervene. They had only feigned disinterest and intended to return all along. By now, they likely expected the Orcs had abandoned the planet and that the human population had been wiped out long ago. They had anticipated no interference, a reasonable expectation, especially with no Orc fleet evident in the system. If any Orcs did remain, well, the Inquisition certainly had the means to remove them. The Wolf Lord and his brothers had to stride a delicate line. They had to convince the Inquisition to provide transport off the planet and hide all evidence that there was anything special about this place, and he had to keep his non-conforming people from causing any trouble. This would be no easy task. This Inquisitor could either prove the savior of Vireo, or a danger as real as the Orcs. Knowing it would not take long before the Inquisitor realized they had successfully recruited Vireons into their ranks, it was simple math. He sent all his new bloodclaws and aspirants into hiding. He and his warriors were vocally supportive and welcoming to the visitors, hoping the people of Jegan Station would take their cues from them and follow suit. He wanted nothing that could be construed as heresy to enter the Inquisitor's ears. The Astartes knew there was a high likelihood of failure. If it came to it, the only option would be to kill or detain their guests and commandeer their ship. This was a task he was sure his warriors could easily accomplish, but it would be a last resort. Unfortunately, the Inquisitor was good at his job. He recognized the oddities immediately. Though he did not discover the Astartes recruits, he smelled deception. These space wolves stank of it. He had been shocked to find the blasphemous Fenrisians here. He wondered how long they had been here and what they might know. They had ever been a thorn in the side of the Administratum, and now here they were, interfering with his personal assignment, occupying his space. Even the ordinary savages and rabble wore heresy like a badge of honor. And yet the most deplorable report was that the space wolves had apparently brought the spawn of chaos with them when they arrived, and allowed them to soil the surface of this world with their corruptive presence. That information had not been easy to extract, but he had his methods. The source claimed the filthy warp creatures had been eradicated, but even so, this news complicated things. His righteous ire was building. Still, the Astartes were a formidable foe that could easily overwhelm his paltry bodyguard. He would have to tread carefully. He maintained his initial coldness, knowing that it was expected. If he was too obliging, the space wolves would sense his duplicity, and their senses for such things were keen and not easy to fool. So with measured platitudes, he assured the daunting Wolf Lord that he would gladly provide transportation back to Imperial space and send support against the troublesome orcs. Truthfully, all attempts between these two men to gain the trust of the other would have always been doomed. There was too much bad blood between the wolves and the ecclesiarchy, and this Wolf Lord and Inquisitor were both too canny to ever be fooled by each other. On some level, they both knew the other's true intentions, and so the Wolf Lord readied his warriors, and the Inquisitor readied his escape. Tragically for the Vireons, the Inquisitor and his retinue were quicker. Apparently not all of the mundane laborers and acolytes had been as simple as they seemed. They very capably secured the survey party's stealthy departure during an orc bomb run, while the space wolves presumed they would be huddling in the bunker. The Inquisitor's flight was a terrible development. Still, no threats had ever been exchanged, and on the surface, all had been cordial and above board. There was no evidence, apart from a hasty departure, that the Inquisitor would not keep his word and send a rescue ship and reinforcements. But in spite of their assurances to the people that all was well, the space wolves knew in their hearts that they had missed their chance to save the planet.